Welcome to the second webinar of the week for National Apprenticeship Week. This is a really exciting week for us here at the RNN Group. We have tons going on. In fact, I was just talking with my colleague James here about all that is going on this week, including webinars, progression events, lots of really fantastic case studies for welcoming former apprentices, current apprentices in to talk, and we have our awards event tomorrow night. But today, it is all about employers. A huge thank you to our employers and the partners we work with to develop our apprentices. This day is about you. This is the theme for today. Thank you to employers. And I have James Godsall here, who is our Director of Employer Partnerships and Apprenticeships, who is going to talk us through the guide to apprenticeships. This is for the employers out there. And of course, actually parents, carers, school careers leads will find this useful and informational too. And we will be sending this out afterwards to those various audiences who may be interested in hearing the basics about apprenticeships, and hopefully some golden nuggets from James too about what is new this year. So James, over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. And yeah, welcome to our Employers and Parents and Carers Guide to Apprenticeships during National Apprenticeship Week. As Lucy said, I'm James. I'm Director for Employer Partnerships and Apprenticeships. I've worked for the group for about 8 years, and through that period of time, there's been a lot of transition to the apprenticeships, and there's some quite significant transitions on the horizon, which I'll talk about in a minute. First of all, if I can get the presentation to work. There we go. What is an apprenticeship? So an apprenticeship essentially is a job that encompasses training. The training should be at least 20% of a person's time. It's suitable for anybody over the age of 16. As long as you are working age, you can do an apprenticeship. There's no upper age limit. And apprenticeships are from level 2, which I'll go through in a minute what level 2 means, right the way through to level 7. And they can take anywhere from 12 to 48 months. So you can imagine coming in at 16 years old, having just left school, signing up to a 4-year apprenticeship is quite a significant investment. But what it will lead to at the end is formal recognition of your skills, knowledge, and behaviors. A qualification in some instances. Not all apprenticeships have a qualification in them because the apprenticeship is the qualification. So they're nationally recognized. If you complete a level 3 apprenticeship, whether there's a qualification in it or not, you are qualified to level 3 and 4 and so on. And the reason why that off-the-job training part is so important is because unlike a lot of qualifications where people will sign up for the training and then do it in their own time, an apprenticeship has to take place during your normal working hours. But what makes up the off-the-job training is the bit where providers and employers can get creative. So time spent with a mentor, for example, or time spent at events where you're learning about the skills, knowledge, and behaviors linked to the apprenticeship all count towards that off-the-job training. And so it's really important that you work very closely with your provider on keeping on top of what that looks like for the off-the-job training. Now, normally what happens is you'll attend college for a day a week. We run a variety of different pathways. Some of our apprenticeships are done entirely one-to-one, bespoke, and we do that based on feedback from our employer advisory boards, where we get groups of employers together to tell us about our delivery, what's going well, what needs to change, and we make those adaptations as we go. So as an example, in our care apprenticeships, where we know working in health and social care is extremely challenging, there are lots of curveballs that get thrown at you on a daily basis. Committing to coming to college one day a week was just not viable for our employers. So what we did was adapt our delivery to make it one-to-one, so that you would have a tutor come in at a time that suits you and then work through the qualifications as we go. On the flip side of that, for some of our senior management qualifications, we know that alumni and that group delivery is so important, because as senior leaders coming together, you're going to learn just as much from other senior leaders in that group as you are from the tutor who's taking the session. And so for those, even though senior leaders are very busy, we make sure to bring them together so we can get that support from different alumni. And those sessions are done once a month. So we go anywhere from once a week, and we certainly do that for all of our engineering and construction apprenticeships, where we assume no knowledge on entry and we train people up to become fully qualified in their chosen discipline. And the only way you can really do that is to bring learners in every week through to one-to-one delivery, which will be done through a mixture of online and face-to-face. So why choose an apprenticeship? And I'll come at this from the perspective of a learner, but also from an employer taking on an apprentice. So the first thing is, if you're an apprentice, you get paid. You get paid holidays. You have a contract of employment. You are essentially an employee. And the benefit to an employer for that is that unlike agency staff or seasonal staff, where you have limited control over that individual, they know they're coming in for a short period of time and then they're going and doing something else. It can be very difficult to instill the culture you want for your business with an agency or temporary member of staff. That apprentice is your member of staff to mold and develop as you see fit. Um, Employers report back that it has a significant increase on the amount of retention for staff. So making that investment, especially when we're in a cost of living crisis, not all employers are in a position to offer pay rises that keep up with the cost of living. Making that investment in training is a demonstration that you value that team member. And because of the way that they're funded, 95% of the apprenticeship is funded by the government if you're not a levy payer. And if you are a levy payer, i.e., you have a wage bill over £3 million, then you can't spend it on anything other than an apprenticeship anyway. It's a good way of making that investment in that individual, seeing a significant change in their behaviors and knowledge, but also showing that commitment to them and helping with that staff retention. From an earning potential for an apprentice, they earn and reportedly earn 270% more over their lifetime than a university graduate. And 85% of apprentices remain in employment after their apprenticeship. So if that's the national figure. At RNN Group, we actually have 95% of our apprentices stay on with their employer after they finish. Now, and that's probably partly down to us having a lot of learners that are already working for an employer. So all of our team leaders, all of our senior managers are already employed, and ideally they're still employed at the end of their apprenticeship. The other benefit to a business is that whilst you are embedding your knowledge into that apprentice, they're also coming to college and picking up from other learners how they do things in industry. And that might be a double-edged sword. They might come back with some weird and wonderful ideas, but what they're learning is the cutting edge techniques and processes that are being used nationally, and they're fed through the qualifications that we offer. So, for example, we are implementing AI software into a lot of our digital programs. So, for business administration, team leading, and we're making sure that that is embedded within the standards, even though it's not required, because we know through our advisory boards it's something employers really value. And so that's something that you wouldn't necessarily get if you got an off-the-shelf management qualification that just had textbooks and exams that you sent off for. The other side of it is we're working with lots of different businesses. As a group, we work with over 850 businesses on a regular basis within the South Yorkshire and North Nottinghamshire area. And so what we're getting is lots of different feedback, and we make sure that filters into all of our teaching, learning and assessment plans. So I spoke earlier about the different levels of apprenticeship. Just to sort of break that down, I call it old money. From an old money perspective, the intermediate apprenticeship, which is level 2, this would likely be the first apprenticeship you would do having left school, is the equivalent to 5 GCSEs. Sometimes for learners that come in that have got their GCSEs already, it might feel like a step back, but it's important to note that some of the endpoint assessments and I'll cover what endpoint assessments are in a minute, some of the endpoint assessments are quite challenging and quite in depth. They're done over multiple days. They're heavily practically biased, and they can be quite challenging for learners. So even though it may feel like a level 2, as a bricklayer, for example, when you've got to build quite an intricate wall over a 2-day period with an independent endpoint assessor sat watching you, it's quite daunting. And so it's quite important that when we do that initial engagement with the learner, we set it at the right level. Normally after that, you'll progress to level 3, and that is the equivalent of 2 A levels if you was to go down the academic route. And then from there, we offer our higher apprenticeships at levels 4 to 7. So one of our level 4 apprenticeships, which will be new in September, is the AI automation practitioner. And that is all around implementing and utilizing AI software in your business. There is a work-based project in there around AI and how it can have a tangible impact on the bottom line, whether that is efficiencies through increased customer satisfaction and so on. So that would be an example of a level 4 qualification. We don't offer it, well, we do offer it, but not to anyone over the age of 19 because it was defunded, the senior leader, and that's offered at level 7. And that is the equivalent of your first year of university if you were at level 4, right the way through to a master's degree equivalent for those studying at level 7. And then underneath that, we have degree level apprenticeships, which normally have an embedded degree, which is studied part-time, and that'll be validated through one of our university partners, whether that's Sheffield Hallam, Hull University, or the University of Huddersfield. And we have a number of other higher institutions that we work with on a regular basis for those. So in terms of industries that we work in, our primary areas are construction and engineering. That's about 70% of the learners that we work with on an annual basis. And those trades will be anything from bricklaying, joinery, through to plumbing, plastering, as well as some of our white collar construction areas. And then for engineering, we run mechanical, electrical, HNC and higher apprenticeships in engineering, as well as welding. And then you can see on there what our what we call services to business area looks like. So we work in health and social care and business services. We've got one of our new digital courses launching, which I discussed earlier. Early years, if you're wanting to work in childcare, and teaching assistants. And then our leadership and management program, which is going from strength to strength. We work strategically with CMI, which is the Chartered Management Institute, to embed their qualifications into our standards. And feedback from those courses is always very, very strong. People report they can lead better, they can manage better, and they're able to work better up and down the chain once they've completed those courses. So the apprenticeship standards, now these have been around for a little while, but it's important to kind of highlight the requirements of the apprenticeship standard. Each one was developed by industry, working with an employer board, similar to how we operate internally. And those employer boards will feed back a list of skills, knowledge, and behaviours that they will expect to see as part of that. So you can imagine for one of our leadership and management apprenticeships as an example, that advisory board will feed back on what knowledge do we expect to see from a leader, and that will go up the chain. So at level 3, team leader, that's your first management role. What sort of knowledge do we expect to see? And normally that will be done by us in a teaching environment, whether that's online, face-to-face, or one-to-one. And that knowledge development will be done through, we use Google Classroom as one of our digital platforms. And we also use OneFile, which is our e-portfolio system. The skills is all around the practical skills, and a lot of that will be in our workshop. We have bespoke workshop facilities for engineering and construction, but also in the workplace. And that will be done through a mixture of observations where we will go and watch learners in the workplace, see them interact with colleagues and make judgment calls based off those observations. Write-ups that are done by learners that demonstrate they know demonstrated the skills, the practical skills needed. And then also through things like reflective accounts as well. And then the final thing is the behaviours. A lot of those are confirmed by the employer. It can be quite difficult to observe behaviours, especially when you're talking about dealing with difficult customers as an example. You're hopefully not going to see dealing with difficult customers every day, but it's important that they can demonstrate they know how to deal with those types of situations when they occur. And all of that will go into your e-portfolio system. We use OneFile. Providers have lots of different e-portfolios, but they all have the same goal in mind, which is to take evidence of all of those bits of skills, knowledge, and behaviours in all the different ways I just described, and put them ready for an endpoint assessor to look at and confirm. So one of the most important things if you're considering taking an apprentice is doing your due diligence up front and setting them on that road to success. There's sort of 3 things we recommend when it comes to taking on an apprentice. The first one is an initial assessment. We would normally suggest you leave that to your training provider. Maths and English skills are important, and you may say, if you're taking on a bricklayer, why are they important? But there is an expectation that learners can, for example, make a mix of cement, and they'll need to be able to use fractions and percentages to do that. They will definitely be expected to do write-ups for their apprenticeship, but also potentially quotes and written communication to your customers. And that does require a certain amount of literacy and numeracy. Now, we do offer that training as part of the apprenticeship. apprenticeship, and we normally recommend learners go through that if they haven't got their GCSEs in maths and English. However, it's not mandatory for learners that are over 19. It is an optional extra. The other side of things is a skills test. Now, if you're looking at taking on an apprentice for a higher apprenticeship, you would potentially expect them to already have an element of skills development you would want to test. If you're taking on someone at level 2, I would suggest that skills development would be more around just basic manual dexterity if it's a manual role, or their communication skills if it's a customer facing role. And then the final thing, and again, this would be done by your training provider, is a skill scan. It's very important that the apprenticeship doesn't teaches substantive amounts of new skills, knowledge, and behaviors. If all it's doing is teaching them a couple of new things, it's no good. So we need to make sure when we do those skill scans, we're really clear that this learner is going to get substantive new skills and knowledge from the apprenticeship. So at the end of the program, the learner will go through a gateway. That will be an agreement between the employer, the training provider, and the apprentice that they are happy that the skills, knowledge, and behaviors I just spoke about have all been met. This apprentice is ready to undertake their endpoint assessment. And that endpoint assessment will be a mixture of normally a practical session, which could be anything from a 2-day, I mentioned earlier about BRIC, a 2-day practical observation where an endpoint assessor will come in and observe that learner, through to a business improvement project with questioning, and normally underpinned by a professional discussion interview with the independent endpoint assessor with their portfolio in front of them. And that's why that portfolio is so important, because if they're asking them about something that they did maybe 2 years ago, they're not going to be expected to remember that. Having that portfolio in front of them means they can quickly refer back to that evidence that they're talking about and give that rounded answer. And most apprenticeships will have a pass or a distinction. Some have a merit sitting in between. And what we always do is aim for that distinction criteria until you see evidence that they're not going to meet that. It's not realistic that every single learner is going to get a distinction as much as we might like them to. And so we have to be able to make that distinction to say this learner is not quite going to reach that grade. So let's aim at a pass, because what you can do is train somebody for a distinction criteria, over egg it, and then not pass the endpoint assessment at all. So whilst we aim for a distinction initially, we have regular touch points. Every 70 days, we are reviewing that apprentice. And if we think that actually a distinction criteria is out of reach, we'll drop it down to a pass and start looking at those criteria, making sure we're meeting those so that they come away with the qualification. So that's kind of everything from us. There's some contact details there if you'd like more information. I did say I'd have a couple of nuggets for you in terms of new information that's coming out. So one of the things that we've got at the moment is the apprenticeship units. Apprenticeship units are going to be coming out during February, and they will be short bits of training that are part of an apprenticeship but are not a full apprenticeship.